In the past couple months, my friends and I started playing Magic the Gathering. We already meet every Monday to play D&D, so now we're meeting every Friday to play Magic. Most Fridays we'll get together and we started by playing 60-card Magic. It was simple. The idea that you have 4 copies of a card in a deck meant that I could start to learn themes and patterns in someone's deck because I would see multiple cards over and over again. The harder format, in my opinion, is Commander, but it has its different enjoyments that it brings to the table. It is what's called a singleton format. You can only bring 1 copy of any card into any deck, except for non-basic land, meaning that there's a lot more variety and you have to search a little bit farther and wider to find all the cards you need to make your deck complete. I'm a newbie to this, but I've built a few decks and I want to talk about them, make a benchmark for where I am, as well as share with you all some ideas that I have behind deck building and just have some fun talking about Magic the Gathering. Starting off, I think the first thing I got was either from a Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One or another one. I unboxed my first Planeswalker, Nahiri. And with that, I was excited, and I put her down as a commander and started making a commander deck. Found out later she can't be a commander, so I kind of cheated that game. But what I did find is that there is a card version of her that can be a commander. So I have Nahiri Forged in Fury as the first deck I made. Then I was like, not having a good time because I built it really poorly and I didn't know what to do, and I just thought maybe she's just a bad commander. And I thought maybe that's just how it is. There's maybe optimal ones and then ones you play for fun, but everyone who bought a precon was destroying me, so I bought a precon. And little did I know, I bought the precon I refer to as the cuck chair. This is Nelly Borca, and what she does is never win the game. What she also allows you to do is have a lot of fun while you lose. After having tried to build Nahiri, I tried to build the second deck thinking, oh, well, Nahiri's a bad one, I'll grab a good one. And I grabbed Eret, Remnant of Mnar, who is not a good one either, but he's a fun one. I say not good, by the way. None of these are like expensive cards because they're not the best ones out there. They're not already optimized, I think is the way to put it, but they're very fun to mess around with their little gimmicks. So Eret was the next one I pulled out. And lastly, I have this one, which is kind of a pet project. It's my attempt to use only cards that I already own in order to create a commander deck. So this one features Marchesa, Dealer of Death, allowing me to use 3 colors of the pie in order to kind of filter in some cards that I don't use. My other 2 decks that I really like playing are Boros colors and the Mnar one I'm working on, but a lot of those like Wooburg or all color commanders require a lot of like special lands in order to get them to pull off their gimmick every time, or some good tricks that I don't fully understand. So I don't want to buy 3 colored lands because they're expensive, but I probably need to start looking at ways to get some or put some in this deck to help improve that game plan. But let's go ahead and start with this one being last, because it's the one I know least about. And let's start with the precon, because I think that one I just go over pretty quickly. What I've done is put some of the key cards to the front of every pack to give the idea of what I'm going for in every deck. So with that in mind, let's switch over to our fun little desk view, and let's open up the Nelly Borca precon. So Nelly Borca is a 4-cost commander in the Boros color scheme, Boros being white and red. I didn't know this till later that essentially I think it's based off the guilds in Ravnica that these colors are off of, or a very famous card initially. But we have Nelly Borca, the Impulsive Accuser. She's red and white, costs 4. Vigilance. When Nelly Borca, Impulsive Accuser attacks, suspect target creature, then go to all suspected creatures. The suspect keyword just means when I suspect it, it remains suspected, and it cannot be used to block and must attack every turn, and it cannot attack me if it's able to avoid it. So whenever someone does attack, whenever one or more creature an opponent controls deals damage to one or more opponents of mine, you and the controller of those creatures each draw a card. Essentially, if someone deals damage to not me while she's on the board, they get a draw card, I get a draw card. It's an incentivizing way to keep them from attacking me. And speaking of that, I put the top cards of this deck to be the ones that I think are my favorites or lean into this the hardest and kind of give the idea of what I like about this deck. But I call it the cuck deck because you pretty much always guarantee second place. It's not very good at winning the game unless you get lucky and everyone really hurts each other on the way down. But if people see what you're doing, they're eventually going to swing at you. So you got to do some politicking with this deck. So Ghostly Prison, it's a clear, easy way to say don't attack me. It'll cost you more to do it. They're probably going to get more value swinging elsewhere. And if they swing at you, they're not drawing a card. So kind of sad to do. Agitator Ant, not the best. I just like it. It's fun. At the beginning of your end step, you can look at everybody and say, would you like to take 2 1/1 counters? If you do, you goad those creatures, just meaning they can't attack you. Next is Rite of the Raging Storm. It essentially creates a lightning rager on everyone's board. And this is a 5/1 with trample, and it sacrifices itself at the end of the turn. So every turn they get a free thing to swing at each other. So typically when I have this card in my hand, I'll ask everybody, would you like me to play a card that gives everyone a weapon, or like me to build my board? I usually do that as a way to get them to not attack me. Mob Verdict, this one's just really fun. Everyone secretly votes for another player, and after everyone has voted, you reveal the answers. not where they came from, but to reveal them all. And everyone who has their name said gets to take 2 damage and draw a card, and it's 2 damage to them and all their creatures. So if 3 people vote for one, they take 6 damage and 6 damage to all their creatures. So it's a good way to like board wipe somebody particular, and the fair part is they get to draw cards for every vote they receive. Resolve Advocist is like the antithesis of the Agitator Ant. At your upkeep, you offer 2/1/1 counters, and then that person can't attack me all turn. So instead of goading one creature, you essentially sign a contract to not attack me. And so I'll offer both of those. At the beginning of my turn, I'll be like, all right, who would like 2/1/1 counters? At the end of my turn, I'm like, you already took 2/1/1 counters. Wouldn't you like more? You already can't attack me. But it's different. It's goading and being unable to attack me are 2 different things. This is one of my favorite like game-ending ones. It usually kills someone. For 4 mana, goad all creatures I don't control. So I can keep all my guards up. Nobody can attack me anyways, and I goad everything. So everything on the board is swinging. So the person after me kind of gets shafted because they have to swing their whole board out. And then the person after them will go, well, who should I attack? And unless they brought in somebody big, a big blocker, they'll have to swing out at somebody else. So it's pretty fun. Trouble in Pairs is a good staple card if you can get it. It's expensive, but it's great. It allows you to draw an extra card essentially whenever things happen in 2s. If someone draws their second card, attacks with 2 or more creatures at you, or plays their second spell each turn. People will almost always be playing 2 spells in Commander, so you almost get a card for every turn. Fiendish Duo, this one's just fun. It has first strike and doubles all damage a person would receive. So if a source would deal damage to them, it doubles that. This is Prisoner's Dilemma. It's based off the actual idea of the Prisoner's Dilemma, which is the idea that there's 2 prisoners each separated from each other, and the officers come up to one and say, hey, we've got you and your buddy. If you snitch on your friend, we'll let you walk. But if your friend snitches on you, you'll get 8 years. However, if you both remain silent, you'll only get 4. So this is that same idea. They choose to snitch or to remain silent. If someone chooses to remain silent and anyone snitches on them, they take 12 damage for the whole table. Otherwise, if they all snitch, they all take 8 damage. And if all of them choose silence, they all take 4 damage. So it's in their best interest to all choose silence, but it's funnier when they do otherwise. And then the last card to kind of top this off is Hot Pursuit. It will enter the battlefield and suspect a creature. As long as Hot Pursuit remains on the battlefield, that creature is also goaded. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more players have lost the game, so this is kind of your how to bring it back at the end. This is the only way this deck can really beat the person at the end, is if you've suspected a lot of their creatures and they've killed everyone else, then they kill them. Then at the beginning of your combat on your turn, if 2 or more players have lost the game, all goaded creatures and or suspected creatures, you gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste. So you get to pull all the creatures you've goaded, which is pretty great. That's the general idea of this deck. I've not won more than 1 game with this because really you have to be ignored most of the game. And so you have to politic your way into making people realize the first few times you play this deck, you'll probably die quickly because everyone realizes you're drawing a lot of cards and you're hitting them. But the more they play you with this deck, the more they'll see that you don't really do much. You don't have a lot of damage in this deck. You'd need to build it with some things to actually win the game. I'd be more likely to add cards that would help me make the game more silly than I would add cards that would help me win. Because this deck, I just don't think is worth buffing to be a victory condition deck. I like it more as a kingmaker, which I think is the concept of a deck that decides who will win or helps somebody win, or helps try to keep the game interesting. I look at Commander as a fun format because you have 4 people having fun and doing things together. It's better if everyone gets to do their bit, and your bit is not really intrusive on anyone else's. It's more disruptive, and it's fun to see what they'll do and how they'll react and how they'll sneak around your goad triggers by tapping their creatures with other cards. It's pretty cool. I will go ahead and go over my favorite deck. This is Nahiri, Forged in Fury. This is the one I'll probably pull out most times I play Commander because it's the one I'm most proud of and the one I spent the most money on, so I want to get that money out of the deck. So Nahiri is pretty basic. She has affinity for equipment, meaning she costs 1 less for every equipment I own. And then whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. You may cast equipment spells without paying their mana cost. So it's nice because it lets you just check for lands. And if you do the trick of going like with a wide board by bringing a lot of other creatures and equipping them, you get to discard like the top 4 cards each turn in order to look for an equipment, and every equipment you get makes it cheaper to bring her back. And not many people will wipe your artifacts. In my experience, they will wipe your creatures first. So the thing is, it makes her easy to bring back. So this easy deck to win by just bringing down everyone's health or Voltroning her up is my goal. She has all these swords, and if you look, there's an art of her in the future with swords for hands. So my theme in this deck is swords, living weapons, and Mirrodin, which I will show you here. So the first card I have here is the Glimmer Lens, which I really have just to show off the keyword Mirrodin, which means it comes in attached to a 2/2 Rebel, meaning that it just helps me build my board state, adding more people who can swing. This one lets me draw cards. This one lets me, exile things. So it's just to help build the board out more wide instead of, tall. But when people die, then I can equip them onto someone new. But it's a nice way to turn an equipment into a creature, which is cool. Next is lands like Inventor Fair. Ones that give me the ability to tutor for artifacts or equipments are awesome for this deck. We have Cauldron Complete, which is living weapon. This is a different version of kind of the Mirrodin trigger, but instead of being a 2/2 Rebel, it's a 0/0 germ. So it dies the moment that this thing unequips. So if you ever unequip this from it, it will die. But the nice thing is this comes in essentially as a 5/5 first strike, trample, indestructible, haste, which is awesome. And on living weapons, whenever they equip to someone else, they give them that same feature. Pure Steel Paladin, this is part of one of the biggest gimmicks the deck has, which is equipping artifacts for nothing or for cheap. So equipment you control has equip 0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. I will almost always control 3 or more artifacts. This has been the game winner for me most games. I get the Colossal Hammer on the board. It costs you only 1. It means it lowers her cost by 1. It's a great thing to have on the board. But I will tell you, if you have this in your deck, it is funny, but it makes you a target immediately. It might not be worth playing it till you can equip it that turn. And otherwise, it's just going to get you shot at. At least that's been my experience. This is the cards I'm most proud of. I like the swords, so the swords theme here was to try to get Nahiri or somebody I equip protection from all colors, or to widen my board out so I can swing at multiple people and not be able to be blocked. The swords of Truth and Justice, Feast and Famine, Wealth and Power, and the Blade of Forge and Frontier are all the cards I have in here that allow me protection from certain colors. It's whatever 2 colors are on the card. So for this one, it's protection from white and blue. And then when I swing, equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, I put a +1/+1 counter on a creature I control and proliferate. So it's 2 +1/+1 counters on somebody. And then if I've already done it once, I can kind of spread it out, share the love. Then we have another tutor, just like this one, that also lets me play cards from my hand for really cheap. So if I have a 7-cost equipment like Keldara Complete, but Stoneforge Mystic on board, I pay 2, tap her, and then play Keldara Complete, a 7-cost artifact for 2 mana and a tapped creature. And lastly, this was kind of the start of the whole swords thing, was I drew the Sword of Feast and Famine, and that made me really excited when I saw that when you swing and hit somebody, that player discards a card and you untap all your lands. It's a wild, wild card, and once you get this attached to your commander, if you just play this and manage to get your equipment attached to her, she becomes a 7/6, which in the early game is pretty nice to have, considering you can pull Nahiri out usually around turn 3 to 4, depending on what equipment you pulled and dropped. But that's the main gimmick of this deck. Otherwise, I'm just lowering costs, playing more equipment. I have 8 protection spells, 8 ramp spells. This one was built using the idea of the cube method, meaning that you have 32 lands, 8 kind of core themed cards, 8 secondary themed cards. And for me, that's Mirrodin, equipment, and living weapons. That's kind of my 3 themes I'm running through with this deck. So I split that up with the 4/4/4, however I needed to. And then 8 ramp cards, and there's ramping equipment that lets you like swing and go for a land. There's ones that you can equip and gives you +1/+1 for all the artifacts you control. There's a lot of good stuff in this deck. But all in all, Nahiri, Unfortunate Fury is one of my favorite. I think I love Boros colors, and I love Voltron. That's my favorite thing. So there's different decks that I want to mess with, but pretty much all of them deal with auras or equipments or enchantments because I just think it's so cool. To equip things to people. I love that idea that my card is now, wielding this sword and so on and so forth. I think that's just an awesome gimmick. Let's move on now to Eret, Remnant, and Mnar. This deck's really in its prototype staging. I need to get some more things together, but I did get a few cards to help really round out what I'm trying to do here, because I think I would describe it as pretty much a token deck across the board. I'm trying to create as many mirror tokens or hit an infinite and then win the game off of something odd. The infinite really only works off 1 card. However, I have a lot of graveyard recursion in this deck, so there's a chance that someone kills a lot of my creatures, I bring back my graveyard, and then that same turn I have an infinite combo. So let's talk about how that works. We got good old Eret, Remnant, and Mnar. By the way, I'm pretty far in this video, but I'm just going to say, when I'm staring at the cards, I'm looking at them through the monitor lens, which means it looks like I'm looking away from you all. Apologies. But he's simple, and one thing I learned was Eret, Remnant, and Mnar is a 3-cost colorless commander. If you know the rule about commander, you can only use cards in your commander's identity. Your identity includes cards here, colors here. So since he has all 5 colors, I can use all 5 colors in this deck, even though he's a colorless commander. But nice and easy, 3-drop, and whenever you cast a mirror spell, create a 1/1 mirror artifact creature token. Simple, simple. At the beginning of combat, on your turn, untap each mirror you control. If you know the gimmick of mirror, they're essentially like Llanowar elves, but they're more expensive and kind of shittier mana dorks. But it's still fun to make a mirror ball and roll it at people. That in mind, you'll see the first card here is literally a mirror ball. I think they call it like elf ball deck when you just like throw a bunch of elves and you're throwing them at people. And then lastly, pay all 5 colors or Wooburg to put 3 1/1 counters on every mirror you control. Activate this only during your turn. So, awesome way to just be able to go, I pay 5, I buff everybody, I pay 5, I buff everybody, I pay 5, I buff everybody, and so on and so forth. Every turn that I can do this, it's awesome because usually people don't target my commander till later in the game. He only costs 3, so he does happen to get knocked out early. It's fine. But when I bring him out and I tap him for 5, if he hasn't been killed yet, they'll go, oh, we need to kill McAllister's commander or board wipe. And when they do, he goes up to being a 5 cost, which I can guarantee I can pay because his Wooburg colors is all 5 of the color pie. That in mind, I have some cards here on the top. Let me make sure I have just the ones I need. Yep, this is the general basis of the deck, in my opinion. We have the Mirror Battlesphere, which is when Mirror Battlefield enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 Mirror artifact creature tokens. Whenever Mirror Battlespheres attack, you may tap X untapped mirror control. If you do, it gets plus X plus 0 until end of turn and deals X damage to a person it's attacking. So the nice thing is, essentially, if I have a way to make infinite mirror and I swing with this, I could go through blockers and hit somebody directly in the face for that. So that's part of the goal of how you win with this deck. Get a bunch of them, get someone low enough, and then throw all your mirror at it. And because this is fine, if I have a bunch of mirror tokens that aren't buffed by him, I can still swing for lethal. This is the best part for the infinite combo and really the only part. So if he dies, I have a lot of ways to bring him back from the dead via reclaimers or other things. But this is the Mnar Galvanizer. The Mnar has other Mnar creature or mirror creature you control get +1/+1. So it's nice. It's a lord. And I could pay 1 and tap him to untap every other mirror you control. He's got some pretty cool little silly combos you can do to like double your mana if you have some dorks on the board. For instance, if you have 2 people that can create mana, you tap both of them. You got 2 mana. You tap him, pay 1, so you have 1 floating mana left, and then move to combat. He untaps because you moved to combat, and then boom, you can pay to tap him again and turn all your dorks back after tapping them again. But the more dorks you have, the better. He can go infinite, and I'll explain why and how here in a second. This is one way he can go infinite. This is mechanized production. I like the theme. It fits the idea of these Mnar being robots. You can enchant a creature, so you'd enchant your Galvanizer, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a token that's a copy of the enchanted artifact. At this point, the infinite can be set up. This is the easiest card to do with, but theoretically having 2 other Mnar will do it as well. But if I were to copy him, so now I have 2 Mnar Galvanizers, I tap him for 2 mana. I then pay 1 mana and tap him to untap other creatures. So I now have 1 mana left. I pay. I now have 3 mana. I tap him for 1 to untap other creatures, and the cycle continues. And then boop, 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 however you want to do it until I have, let's say, infinite mana, and then I can do whatever I want with that infinite mana. So that's one way to get that little chain started. This is just to show you the dorks. This is an Iron Mirror. There are Iron Mirror, Copper Mirror, different metal name mirrors, but essentially there are 2 costs for 1/1 that dork for a different mana. This is a legendary creature. It doesn't fit fully into the theme, but you'll see why I like it. I don't like that it's a Phyrexian mirror. I like the mirror that are not infected, but it allows me to create mirror tokens because creature tokens you control now have haste, and at the beginning of your turn, create a 2/1 Phyrexian mirror artifact creature token. Then you may choose a token you control. If you do, the other token becomes a copy of that token. So in a world where I have maybe the token of the Mnar Galvanizer left and I don't have him, I could play this down, copy the token, and have 2 Mnar Galvanizers on the turn, and it has haste. So another way to kind of set up the infinite. Also, it gives me mirror every turn, which is good. Indestructible Mirror, when I'm buffing things up, after 1 turn, this becomes a 3/4 indestructible mirror, and it'll get all the buffs because I have a ton of things that give mirrors buff. We have Mirror Reservoir, add 2 to your mana pool, spend this only to cast mirror spells and activate mirror abilities. That's great. And then you can pay 3 and tap it to return a mirror from your graveyard. So once again, a way to get back Mirror Galvanizer, Palladium Mirror, or any mirror that I think is necessary. Then we have kind of game-winning cards. If I have a good board built up, I can cast Organic Extinction. Your artifacts can help you cast this spell. I can tap artifacts in order to do it. So if I have, 7 mirror tokens, then I can tap 7 and make this a 3-cost board wipe for everyone but me, which is nice. Mirror Kinsmith lets me tutor for a mirror. Tutor being search your deck for a mirror card. And this is the newest card I got, which I really, really like because it's Genesis Chamber. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. So it lets everyone, including myself, create mirror, which is just fun for me. I really just want it for me. And honestly, letting other people create mirror or mirror is fine with me. So that's the main gimmick of Eret, Remnant, and Mnar. It's just to do all that. I have to work through this deck because I really don't have... There's some mirror that I have in here because they just are called mirror, but I really could just go through this deck and thin out some things that I don't need to. Like Dramatic Reversal, I don't know if I really need that, but I liked it for the idea that I could pay 2 to untap everybody. And if I have a bunch of dorks out, Herald's Horn is nice because, you know, once I select mirror as my type, all spells of that type cost 1 less to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, I can look at the top card. If it's that, I can reveal it, put it in hand. So it gives me an extra draw. It's a nice little way. We have Mirror Turbine and other such ways to like buff them and protect them and draw cards off of it. So it's a pretty neat deck, but the problem is really my land base is not well. It doesn't really effectively get my commander the Wooburg color tapping as much as I'd like it to. It can fall flat on its face if I don't get a good one. And having 4 Triome cards could really change that for me. We will see how it goes. I don't want to buy those. They're $12 lands, and I don't currently want to buy lands that just tap for lands for $12. I'd rather try to pull them and then look at doing that later, or go buy a precon that has a lot of them. So this is my last deck. This is the one that I built out of my bulk, so it's probably the least cohesive, but the main idea is it works off Marchesa, Dealer of Death, and she allows you to commit a crime, and when you do, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the other into the graveyard. So this deck is 2 themes, graveyard recursion and crime. I have creatures that get better off of crime and creatures that come back from the graveyard for cheaper, like Unearth. So with that in mind, it's only built out of cards I own. So anything that I have, like this really weird one, like the Aether Box Topper Piss Land is what I call it. I have Propaganda, Feed the Swarm, Cruel Ultimatum I happen to pull. Just some fun cards that I pulled or traded for. So I'm not selling anything or buying anything for this deck. It's just a basic deck to go through and have fun trying to play a card, do a crime, target someone, come back from the dead. I just like this idea that when I look at the 2 cards, what if I pulled one of them being Hollow Marauder and the other one being, you know, Null Priest of Oblivion, and I pull these 2 off, I commit a crime, so I get to look at 2 of them, and one of them has to go to the graveyard, and this one becomes 1 less to cast for everybody in the graveyard, and this one lets me kick to bring someone back. Well, I'm like, you're a 2 cost, anything under 3 is pretty easy to bring back from the graveyard straight to the field, so I might just say, okay, well, I don't need lifelink, I don't need menace, and I'm not able to kick this, so you go to the graveyard, making you cost 1 less. That's a lot of the fun, and it helps me hit my land drop every turn, which is nothing to scoff at, because I failed to hit my land drops quite a lot, and I've learned with this deck to try not to be greedy. I was goldfishing it, which is to kind of like play solitaire with your deck. You just play it. What I'll typically do is, you know, every so often I'll throw out a counterspell at nothing just to like prove how the deck would work. And I've had some fun time goldfishing that deck. So that was my commander showcase. I have 4 commanders. I'm excited to have them. The next one I'm looking at is Eret, the Cursed Apple, or Eret and the Charmed whatever, and she's a Orzhov commander, I believe. It's the black and white. I'm excited to try her out for the first time. Should be fun, but these decks I'm going to play with a little bit more probably before I buy her. That way I'm saving some money. Valentine's Day is today, so I can't be spending it all in one place. So thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you want to talk more about Magic or play Commander online, I've been playing online on Discord. It's been pretty fun. So thank you all, and peace.